Feels good to be back in the car again.
Back in the
yeah. I was gonna say driver's seat, but there's two of us.
It has been 3 weeks, which is So for those of you wondering where we went for the past week, I started a new full-time employment. I was unemployed producing this podcast full-time.
Everybody, stop what you're doing and clap for Mark right now.
Don't clap for capitalism. That's the one rule of the podcast. So yeah, the amount of time that I actually have to be able to put into the podcast has been a little bit reduced. So there might be some changes to the podcast. For example, for tonight's episode, I haven't prepared a script. I kind of just have a list of talking points that we're going to go through instead. And so the podcast might be a little bit more conversational, a little bit kind of more free-flowing, but hopefully all of that same good theory goodness will be there. And if this isn't really what you guys are into, we'd love to hear feedback on like kind of this new kind of episode on either our Twitter or our subreddit. And if you really, really want that like old style, more scripted content, if you really, really preferred that, if that's what you liked out of this podcast, then I don't know, we might consider trying to do that instead. But that just might mean that episodes take a little bit longer to come out than they used to. So that's just kind of going to be the trade-off there.
Are we old enough to have classics yet? Classic format?
Actually, we're
coming up on a year.
We are coming up on exactly 1 year since our first episode was released. I'm actually going to pull up our stats real quick. Let me find that
December 19th, I think it was.
December 6th, actually. So
God.
Our first podiversary will be between now and the release of our next episode. So I think we're going to celebrate that anniversary on the next episode.
We should do something special.
We should do something special. Cool. I don't know, maybe... I don't know, we'll figure it out.
Are we going to talk about the election at all?
The election at all?
We haven't done an episode since the election.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Has it really only been 3 weeks since the election?
Yep. Well, less, technically, since it was decided.
What?
I think it was decided, released on the 8th. Wait, let me check my little calendar widget here. Nope, it would have been the 14th.
Well, it was our last recording was after the 3rd, but it would have been on Thursday. We always used to record on Thursdays.
Yeah, it was a Thursday, so
it would have been like the 6th. Tuesday was the 3rd, so 4th, 5th. I don't know.
Was it the 7th that it was released?
It would have been released on the 7th.
No, it was released on the 6th. I know our last was the 6th. So
it would have been released on the 6th. Yes.
Okay.
You're correct.
Yeah, so it was the 7th. So it's been almost 3 weeks.
Wow. It really feels like it's been so much longer than that.
Yeah. It's okay. Can I share a quick anecdote?
Yeah.
So where were you when you found out that Joe Biden won?
I actually don't really remember because I remember being really, really confident for a while and kind of deciding myself that he had won, even a couple days prior to that. I feel, but we recorded on Thursday and I feel like by then I felt pretty sure that he was going to take it. I remember on, I think it was Wednesday night, which was the first day that it kind of started to look up for Diamond Joe Biden. And I remember we still had, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada up in the air. And I was talking to my parents and they were pretty nervous. And I said, I think Biden's going to take all 4 of those states. And that's what ended up happening. At that point, that all seemed pretty obvious though. If you just did a little bit of the math at that point, it was pretty obvious that he was going to take all 4, even on Wednesday night.
Yeah. But what they should have done is, stop counting when Trump was ahead because there's no reason to count more votes after that.
These jokes are 3 weeks old, but they're a year outdated by now.
That's fine. I'm still gonna make them.
You really broke my fucking brain telling me it's been 3 weeks. I'm absolutely floored at that.
I'm so sorry. It does feel like a long ass time. 3 weeks is a long time in quarantine. It doesn't feel like it's been a fucking year, almost a year since we've been in this. It's been like 9 months. My entire 23rd year is just kaput. I'm not sure if I told you this, but I just wanted to lead into this anecdote. We went way off track, but as soon as I left IKEA, because I was just getting some dressers and shit.
Yeah.
I drive past a park and there's a group of white people doing the high hopes dance. And I'm not shitting you. And my girlfriend's like, I was like, oh God. And my girlfriend is like, oh, I think that's just a Zumba class, baby. And I'm like, you don't understand. If there's one thing I like can recognize in an instant, it's the high hopes dance. The yeah. I can't do it, but like, so,
oh God.
And I was like, any like minor relation I had about the election, about Trump getting what he deserved, was just squashed by I don't know, Brooklyning.
Dude, yeah, I do actually remember. I remember leading up to the election, I was really, really nervous that Trump was going to take it. And that fear kind of hypnotized me into really, really pulling for Biden, because was the only realistic alternative. And I was kind of worried as the election rolled around that should Biden win, I was going to have a hard time kind of detaching myself from that state of mind and getting back into the place I needed to, like, you know, go on this podcast and advocate for actual leftism instead of like just like pure entryism and that kind of stuff. And that really, I don't know why I was so fucking nervous, because it did not take more than like 12 hours for these fucking Democrats to piss me the fuck off. Right back to where I was in like March.
Dude, I was like happy as soon as I found out, and then I like had like a horrible like stomach sinking feelings, like, oh God, am I a liberal now? Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah, and then you hear the Abby Spanberger call, and you're just like, nope. I know who my enemies are.
Okay. And my enemies are currently, for the next hour and a half, are libertarians.
Welcome to We Read Theory, the podcast where we read theory so you don't have to. And I might have to normalize that in post because I got really close to my microphone. I was very excited to be back. My name is Mark.
My name has been and always will be Alex.
So, based on the title of the episode, y'all already know it. We are talking about one of the libertarian big boys, Mr. Murray Rothbard, the second Murray we've talked about on this show. I don't know what's up with that. And I feel like a lot of the time leftists talk about libertarians, it's kind of an unproductive dunk session. Like it's not a bad thing. It's not counterproductive or anything like that. But we're just doing it for fun. Libertarians are kind of an easy target. They're so obviously silly to people who are kind of like outside the ideology. And so I don't want to like explain that libertarianism is like wrong or incoherent or explain why that's the case so much as I want to use the reasons why it's wrong to demonstrate some more important and more universally applicable ideas for us as we go forward with our political advocacy and our political action. The work is The Betrayal of the American Right. And The Betrayal of the American Right by Murray Rothbard is it's a work of history, but there's also there's a lot of theory in it. And really the central premise of the book is the idea that there was this older version. Stop me if you've heard this before. There used to be this older version of the American right wing And while today the right wingers, these conservatives, they're crazy, they're war hawks, and they want to use the government to create monopolies, and it's crazy. And it didn't used to be this way. Conservatives used to have some integrity, and they used to be isolationists. They didn't used to want to go out and conquer everything. So this period was it was in kind of the 1930s where the old right, according to Murray Rothbard, gets its start. And this is the right that's defined by free market economics, non-intervention abroad. So libertarianism, basically, what we think of libertarians thinking of themselves. And while conservatives were more socially conservative and wanted to kind of police people socially, more libertarians at least see themselves as not wanting to police people's personal lives as much. So there's that difference there. But that created a space for quote-unquote right libertarians who had previously kind of sided with the left because they were both anti-World War I, to now siding with the right, who was anti-New Deal, and then was also later anti-entering World War II, where the left was more in favor of entering World War II and kind of fighting against rising fascism. And so already we kind of run into one of the big things I wanted to talk about, which is that there's something that we should always keep in mind when we're analyzing politics, and that's that if we find ourselves continuously confused by the things that are happening, if it seems like people are acting without consistent purpose and that their actions are kind of inexplicable, you're probably using a political framework to judge the world that is getting something wrong, right?
It's your political ideals are overfitted to the reality you've been living in.
Yeah. You're not accurately seeing how things are. And so point number one of, we're going to say 3 main points, is material analysis, material analysis, material analysis. Holy shit. Libertarians have no material analysis. And let me talk about what I mean when it comes to the anti-war stuff. Rothbard is like super confused. Then maybe that's an unfair characterization, but he definitely treats the fact that the left was anti-World War I and then the right was anti-World War II, and he kind of treats this as sort of an inexplicable switch. And it's like, this is kind of a trap that libertarians get into a lot, where they think that the only positions are pro-war and anti-war, and anyone who's like pro-war is always pro-war, and anyone who's anti-war is always anti-war. And it's like, some people actually like give a shit what the war is about or who they're fighting or like other kinds of details like that. But Murray Rothbard's worldview doesn't even have space for those kinds of opinions. Like, not wanting to go into World War I and then wanting to go into World War II to fight the Nazis is inherently like hypocritical to him. And if that's the case, then everyone is just acting like totally without explanation. And that should be a sign to him that his worldview, it doesn't make sense. He's not drawing political distinctions and political lines in the ways where he should if he wants to get an accurate view of how people think and what they're doing,
Yeah, like everything has to be black and white. Everything has to be explained by facts and logic, but it just doesn't work like that. There's gray areas to everyone's individual views as well as larger political philosophies.
Yeah,
there's some nuances.
And then, of course, when we get into him talking about the pro-war and anti-war kind of movements in America when it comes to World War II, we get some more really familiar talking points. So he describes the kind of pro-war faction as being an unlikely alliance of communists, plutocrats, the media, and urban bankers.
What is an urban banker?
I don't know. What is an urban banker?
It's something's going off in my head.
I don't know.
Someone says urban anything, it just makes me think.
It sounds like Jew to me.
Oh.
I mean.
He's taking the banker part.
He says communists, plutocrats, the media, and urban bankers.
Oh, anything following the media is probably going to be relating to Jews. Yeah.
That's so fucking JQ. And that's literally Okay, he actually follows the Nazi line on a lot of shit when it comes to like his anti-interventionism in World War II. It's actually fucking wild. So we have that idea that like communists and then like the hyper rich under capitalism and the media and the bankers, which are also, I don't know why they're not included in plutocrats, but that's also like how the Nazis saw the world. Like that is literally, they thought that the hyper capitalist West and then the communist Soviet Union or socialist Soviet Union were like both under like the control of this Jewish cabal. And it's kind of like what we see with people like Ben Shapiro today, other people who call themselves libertarians, where the Jewish question is all in there, but they just don't say the J word.
They say globalist.
He doesn't even say globalist, but it really seems like it's there. And I think there's a bit more to it as well. Like, for example, he talks a lot about how people who were just anti-war and didn't like interventionism were smeared in the media and were like called Nazis or like fascists or whatever. And then get who his fucking big example is.
Of someone who was an anti-interventionist?
Who was anti-intervention and who was smeared unfairly for this as a Nazi.
Who?
Charles Lindbergh.
Why would he pick Charles Lindbergh of all people? Weren't there like better examples of people who were, I don't know, had at least socially normal political views?
The point is that Charles Lindbergh is like a well-known, well-established Nazi sympathizer with ties to groups like the German American Bund and the America First Party. The America First Party is described by Rothbard completely as like just a non-interventionist party, nothing to do with like being like fascists or anything like that. But like that's what we understand in the United States, is that like anti-interventionism about World War II was very much tied to being politically sympathetic to the Nazis. And I have a great quote. You're gonna love.
Had there been no like anti-intervention movements before that, where someone's like, "Oh,
well,
these people are all of a sudden anti-intervention. They must be Nazis."
That was the case though. At least according, I mean, if you take Rothbard's word for it, then the right wing, the conservatives, were extremely pro, or at least more so pro-war when it came to the First World War, and it was the left who was more anti getting into that war, and that's consistent with my understanding of it. But there was something of a flip there with World War II, and of course we understand that the nature of the war was very different. Mm-hmm. Although, you know, we can talk about whether or not America's actual goal in entering the war was to fight fascism or was to advance its own imperial interests, but regardless, there were a lot of leftists who were genuinely worried about the encroachment of fascism around the world and wanted to get involved for that reason. So regardless of what the American government was interested in.
Right. So I guess temporarily didn't align, but
I have an absolute banger of a quote. You're going to love this.
I'm ready. Lay it on me, bud.
Quote, "Influential Jews and Jewish organizations helped agitate for war, and helped also to put economic pressure upon opponents of the war. This very fact, of course, served to embitter many isolationists against the Jews, and again create a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. This resentment was intensified by the hysterical treatment accorded to any isolationist who dared to so much as mention these activities by Jews. In early 1942, the Saturday Evening Post printed an article critical of Jews by the liberal pacifist Quaker Milton Meyer, an act that was used by the establishment to fire the conservative and isolationist editor Wesley N. Stout and his entire editorial staff, and replace them with conservative interventionists." Unquote.
Why is he just gotta pin it on? Why?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm kind of unproductively shitting on him, but yeah, like libertarianism suffers centrally from a lack of material analysis. Yeah, that's kind of point number one I wanted to make was just God, material analysis is so fucking important. And I want to go a little bit deeper into that with point two, which is kind of about the fact that libertarianism is an incoherent ideology, but more than that, what it actually means for an ideology to be incoherent. Because I feel like we talk about ideologies being incoherent a lot, and, we generally understand that means that there are internal contradictions there, but I thought maybe we could be a little bit more specific about what these contradictions tend to look like. And I think libertarianism is probably the single best case study of an ideology that is hopelessly, completely incoherent. I have a hot take coming. Because it's no nuance November, but I need to lay the groundwork for it.
All right, hit me.
I would argue that for the most part, an incoherent ideology. So I would argue that an ideology has two major parts. You have the way you want the world to be, which for most people, you could just say policy, but, obviously if you're an anarchist, you're not really interested in policy. You're kind of interested in general social bonds and like stuff like that. I just don't know if policy is really the word you would use.
Probably just vibes, like general vibes.
Yeah, vibes. You got vibes, and then that's downstream of the way you want power to be distributed in the society. So anarchists want all people to be provided for, and kind of be given equal consideration. And to that end, upstream of that, they say, we want power divided as evenly and as like totally dispersed as possible, so that it becomes basically, the idea of power becomes basically non-existent. Whereas with a libertarian, take Rothbard, for example, his main principles that he really, really wants is he's a freer the markets, freer the people kind of guy. He doesn't like intervention. And to his, which is cool. And actually, reading throughout his book, I actually do kind of think Murray Rothbard is a really true believer. A lot of people who describe themselves as libertarians are people like Ben Shapiro, who I don't think even believes in libertarianism in any meaningful way. Whereas, I think that Murray Rothbard actually believes in libertarianism as an ideology. And the big difference between Ben Shapiro and Rothbard is that Ben Shapiro is a liar and Rothbard is completely, hopelessly incoherent. And so what I mean by that is he believes that, the free of the market, free of the people, anti-intervention, anti-intervening in people's kind of social lives as well, in their sexuality, stuff like that. He doesn't talk much about gender, though, and, he does kind of seem to give anti-Semites and Nazis in general a pass, but you want as much freedom for the individual, they say, as possible. Okay, that's policy, or that's the way you want the world to be. That's the downstream part. But what's the upstream part if you are a libertarian? The upstream part is that you think that private business relations based on private property should be the main way that we conduct the society, the main way that we distribute power throughout the society. It should be basically a function of property and your ability to accumulate property, ideally, supposedly, without the use of any kind of coercive force or violence.
Yeah, and where you put your money communicates your desires as like a society.
Exactly.
If you're paying for something, you must like it.
I'm going to demonstrate in one quote, why this is a completely incoherent ideology. And what I mean by that is that the river that is going to be cut by that distribution of power isn't going to flow in any situation to the place where he wants it, where you have free markets, free individual liberties, and non-intervention. And so this quote is from a guy named Chodorov, who is quoted at least once in The Betrayal of the American Right. And this is a quote from inside the book that he's just quoting someone else in it. And it's about the fake libertarian principles of conservatives. So, quote, "The cause of private property has been championed by men who had no interest in it. Their main concern has always been with the institution of privilege, which has grown up alongside private property. They start by defining private property as anything that can be got by law. Hence, they put their cunning to the control of the law-making machinery, so that the emerging laws enable them to profit at the expense of producers. They talk about the benefits of competition and work towards monopolistic practices. They extol individual initiative and support legal limitations on individuals who might challenge their ascendancy. In short, they are for the state, the enemy of private property, because they profit by its schemes. Their only objection to the state is its inclination to invade their privileged position or to extend privileges to other groups.
He's always a libertarian who got mad about an oligarchy?
Exactly! This drove me fucking nuts. And he does this. He goes back and forth. At one point, he's quoting someone who's talking about how the state only exists to... is only there to fuck up like the natural hierarchy between superior and inferior, and how all the state does is that they give the rogues and the layabouts a little extra cash here and there, and then at the same time it's like, oh, and like the state really like preserves privilege and creates monopolies. Monopolies don't exist without the state. And it's like you need to fucking pick one. Does the state redistribute wealth up or down? And it's like once again, like the fact that this makes no sense should key you into the fact that the way you view politics has a fundamental flaw. Oh god, and he goes back and forth on this so much. It's like whiplash. And it's really frustrating though, because he doesn't seem to understand that the thing he wants, which is that you get and he's an anarcho-capitalist. So he wants the state basically completely gone and like not interfering in the business world at all. And if that's the case, then the people who Chodorov is talking about in this quote are going to be the people who are given power in the society. So if you understand practically where distributing power that way goes, and that it's not to the world that you want to create, I don't understand how he rationalizes that.
You can either give the poors a little extra cash, or live in the United States of Coca-Cola. You got to pick one, bud.
Sorry, I was planning the next thing I was going to say, and I only realized what you were saying as the word Coca-Cola rolled off your tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible. I feel like, if I can interject for like 1 second here,
please.
I feel like a lot of libertarians, at least that I knew, that I described in past episodes, will be disillusioned with both the establishment left and the establishment right, and think, there's got to be another party, okay? I'm still shilling for electoralism. I need to be able to participate like this. I need another fringe political group. So they latch on to the anti-corporatism, anti-war, pro-gun, pro-drug legalization, and just not interfering in people's personal lives, which all sound like pretty great things, And like the most annoying thing to me is when I'm like, okay, yeah, what do you believe like politically? And someone's like, I want my gay neighbors to be able to protect their weed plants with AR-15s. Oh God, I am so fucking tired of hearing it.
Yeah, and it's like, but it's that lack of material analysis again. The part where you go, okay, like, what are the political physics at play here? If we give this group of people power, what are they going to do with it? What are their material interests? And this is basically what Marxism did for political philosophy, was it told people like, hey, maybe check if the things you're coming up with are right, because we hadn't done that before. Like, we had Hobbes before, who literally just like sat in a room and was like, before we had absolute monarchs, everyone used to just stab each other all the time. And it's like, it's not like he checked, he didn't know, he guessed. And then he was wrong. Like, whatever the archaeological evidence that we've uncovered seems to suggest that people cooperated with each other a lot throughout our entire existence. That's the whole reason why we're so successful as a species. And yet we still continue to follow what this guy had to say about like how government should be based on that view of human nature, which was wrong. Not even in like kind of a subjective way.
Yeah, the human nature argument really fucking sucks. It can't be just refuted by like any cooperative political philosophy can't be refuted by the fact that you say humans are naturally greedy. It's not gonna work. There's plenty of examples for and to the contrary. There is no one human condition that says humans are gonna, pillage everything in their path in the pursuit of incredible power. Okay, there's plenty of people who are or aren't like that. You can't reject an entire philosophy based on that. That's not how it works.
Yeah, and really the way it seems to be is that of course the way a human is likely to act is based on the conditions you put them in materially, which is of course once again what Marxism is all about and what Marxism gave to political theory and why why it has that moniker of scientific socialism, because that materialism, there's the science.
Is that like the idea of I don't think there's a name for it, but like the phrase like hard times create strong men create good times, good times create weak men. It's a meme. It's 100% a meme.
Yeah, it's like history is written by the victor. Like,
yeah.
No, not always. Sometimes it isn't. You want to know who won a lot? The Mongols, but they didn't. Most of the history was written about them by other people. Meanwhile, the Nazis were big fucking losers, and they got to write a lot of their own history.
Yeah.
So I have a hot take for No Nuance November.
Oh, this is the one you're talking about. Okay.
This is my No Nuance November hot take.
Lay it on me.
There are exactly 2 coherent ideologies. One of them is socialism, in my opinion. I think that there is a sensible connection between the way that socialists want to distribute power among the workers and the people who they want the society to be run for the benefit of, also the workers. Hey, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? You give people who you want the society to be run for the purpose of the power in the society. That makes a lot of sense. The other coherent ideology is conservatism. Conservatism is Machiavellian. It's based in materialism. Not conservative rhetoric, but the way actual conservative politicians think and act. And it's the exact mirror. You have the bourgeoisie, which is a word that's a bit esoteric for a lot of people, so I don't usually like to word it. I usually like to say business owners or business owning class. And those are the people you want to give power. And those are the people for the benefit of whom you want the society to run for. But pretty much every other ideology, I think, breaks down in this connection. Of course, the libertarian ideology breaks down in this connection. You're giving the business, you want the society to be run for the sake of everyone. You're a firm believer in class collaboration, but you're only giving one class the actual power in society. So it's not going to work the way you want. Liberalism is, I think, more coherent, but it still has this breakdown because you have this idea that the state and private property are going to kind of check and balance each other. But, of course, the tendency is for... It's kind of for a building of a cartel between the state and private property interests. And so you end up with a lot of the same outcomes, although probably a more tempered version of what the libertarians want. But ultimately you have that same breakdown, which is that you are giving the working class either no or not nearly enough political power in the system and expecting it to work more for them than that power structure is likely to actually do.
Mm-hmm. I think a hole people might poke in the argument that socialism is a completely coherent ideology is that you can't create essentially centrally planned economy, but we've explained in past episodes where that's totally and completely possible. People just won't do it, or they do it, but it's only for a select few number of people.
Yeah, I mean, you within that overarching moniker of socialism, I think that there are multiple coherent approaches. I think that there's a coherency to central planning, depending on what the state structure surrounding it is, and I think that there is also a coherency to more democratic co-op based versions of socialism and kind of like your anarchist systems as well. I think that there's a general coherency to all of them, which is that the distribution of power is tied directly to the outcomes that they want to produce. Whereas, so I think that that's really what coherency is all about when it comes to ideology.
Okay, so there's no like invisible hand guiding everything like in libertarianism or liberalism.
Yeah, there's no trust me, bro. It'll work out. I want to have a little bit of a philosophical conversation with you about the last point. I want to ask you, I'm going to ask you to define a couple of terms, exactly 2. So the first one is freedom. What does it mean to be free? What's the distinction between freedom and unfreedom?
I mean, I feel like we could have a whole episode about this. You're forced.
Let's have a short conversation.
Okay. Give me a parameter. Give me like in like 3 sentences or like 5 sentences or 6 words or some shit.
Well, what does it mean? What does it mean for an individual to be free? Or what is the distinction between an individual being free or being not free?
I guess the first thing that came to mind to me was that everyone is literally born on equal footing. There's no generational wealth, and for any disability created by society to be supported, I guess that's involved in everyone being born on equal footing. If you are born with a horrible like genetic disease or something, you will be supported. So you'll be on equal footing with everyone who's born healthy.
Yeah,
and that's why I feel like if you're a true libertarian, you probably believe in at least democratic socialism, if not full-blown socialism. You just don't realize it yet. A free society also holds, I guess, every position that's necessary to society in the same regard.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, everyone like one of the things that people say when like communism is brought up is that no one's going to be doctors because it takes so long and it's so much effort and it's so much money to pay for school that everyone's just going to be lazy and sit on their asses instead, or like do something like gender studies,
underwater basket weaving.
Oh my god, that's another thing. I'm so sick of hearing that. But I guess the ability, a free society would hold a gender studies degree in equal regard, because then they could do things like replace cops for familia issues or something like that, and do a hell of a lot more.
What I'm hearing is that like the concept of equality is really central to freedom, the way that you think about it.
Yeah.
I totally agree. As I was thinking about this episode, I got to thinking about, I noticed that I really didn't vibe with the way that Rothbard talks about freedom, because we talk about freedom being like having a choice whether you do a thing or not, and being not free, that you are coerced. And a lot of people kind of draw the line of coercion at like the literal gun to the head. Yeah. And then of course as leftists, we often make the argument that if someone's survival depends on doing something, then they can't be free. Even if the gun is not literally to their head, it might as well be. And then of course, a lot of generally more right-wing people will often counter to that you always have to do something if you want to survive. Even humans that live entirely outside of a society, have to climb the tree for the fruit or hunt animals for like food. You have to do some stuff. And so I feel like just the fact that you're forced to do something is a bad definition of being not free, because then there is no such thing as freedom whatsoever, right? Everything is coercive, because everything ultimately comes back down to your survival, or at least a lot of things.
So you're saying socialists have a bad definition of freedom?
I think that the idea that freedom is based on whether or not there is a need to do something for your survival. I don't know that that's a very useful definition of freedom versus unfreedom. What I think we need to add on top of that to make it work is whether or not your survival comes down to the decision making of another person specifically. So the fact that there is something in nature that you have to kind of fight against in order to survive, that doesn't make you not free. The person living in the wild, in like that state of nature, to use the Locke terminology, no matter how hard their life gets, I don't know that I would ever consider that person to be not free. Whereas your life can be relatively easy living in like the United States, but because your survival is ultimately gatekept behind the decision making of other people, I would consider that person to be less free than the person living in the state of nature.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that was very well put.
And then of course I think the libertarian definition of freedom that comes through in this book is that it's just the state. The state is the only entity that can infringe on your freedom. That's pretty much because Rothbard doesn't really see the idea of like your survival depending on appeasing a business owner who you need to like, by giving them money for stuff or giving your labor to them for money. That gets to be part of the same kind of limitations on your agency as the things you might come across in the state of nature, whereas the state alone is the kind of institution, the kind of entity that can actually infringe on your freedom, which I find really dumb shit.
Yeah, ask any libertarian to define like they say they hate the government, but like what about the government that they hate? And you can find like every single parallel with just like your run-of-the-mill corporation, and you're like, why do you think this? Why do you choose violence? So
that's one half of the point that I want to make. The other half, I want to talk about property. What does it mean for something to be someone's property? What is the defining feature of your property as opposed to things that are not your property, either held in common or someone else's personal property?
I'd face consequences for taking something that's not my property, whether by the state or by the owners of the property themselves.
Okay. So can there be property without the state?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think so.
Really? In an anarchist state, I wouldn't face consequence for taking some guy's car? I said face consequences.
Well, okay, in that case, then if I'm willing to like stab you for your Xbox, is that my Xbox?
I mean, you could try to stab me. Me fighting you back is the consequence.
But if I stab you, wouldn't that be a consequence on you? For trying to fight me?
Okay, so everything... Okay, you're right, Mark. Everything is everybody's property because everyone has consequences, to someone touching.
Well, yeah, I mean that's why I say that you can't have property outside the context of the state, right? Because what makes it your property is that the state will stop other people from using it, not that you will stop other people from using it.
Okay, so with a state, me and the state would both have a problem, but without a state, it would be just me, and therefore it's not property.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
I think if there was no state, I still would like deck someone for using my toothbrush.
Well, okay, but is that property?
But what else would you describe it as if not property?
I would just say that, okay, so like, if the state is the institution with a monopoly on acceptable violence, right? Then in the absence of a state, that means that any person has just as much of a right and ability to use violence on any other person as that person has to use on them, right?
Without a state, okay, yeah.
So that means that who gets, your toothbrush, is it comes down to who is who is able to use violence better. You know, we're all going to be stabbing each other over our toothbrushes, but who's willing to use violence better, like in that particular moment. And so like, I don't know that I would count the things that you manage to keep for a period of time.
So every object's in a transient state, and my toothbrush is my toothbrush so long as I'm willing to put my life on the line for it.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, then that's, I guess, a whole separate thing other than property that we have no word for yet.
Okay, my point is that I think the idea of freedom, when we think of it in the way that we just talked about, where it's about your access to the things that you need for survival being gatekept behind another person's agency, I think that this is really closely related to the idea of property, where property is basically things that just a thing being gatekept, your access to a thing being gatekept behind another person's agency. You see what I mean? And so I think you could make the argument...
So anarchism isn't freedom either.
No, anarchism is freedom because there's no property.
If I'm incredibly free under anarchism because I have no property because everything's everyone's property, then I am technically free.
Yeah, well, because the means for your survival...
But it's being gatekept by other people's violence or the threat of other people's violence.
Well, if the thing that's gatekeeping it is the threat of violence, then yes. Then yeah, I would consider that to be a state.
That's what would happen in a state, because someone's going to want to brush their teeth with my goddamn toothbrush. And I don't like that shit.
Okay, well, okay, here's... My point is this, okay. Is that property and freedom for Rothbard are considered... Your right to property is what gives you freedom. Whereas I think that when we think about freedom and property in the way that we've just kind of outlined, where freedom is not having your means of survival gatekept behind another person's agency, and property is having things that someone may or may not need for survival gatekept behind another person's agency, then for me these things are in direct conflict, and I think that once again is kind of part of what makes the libertarian ideology incoherent.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so like a thing that really bothers me when I read this kind of stuff is that it becomes really clear that it isn't about freedom at all, because it's about property, and the word freedom is just kind of there to make it look nice. And the way that you can tell that this is the case is when it comes down to it. Let me read a quote. Let me read a quote that I think will demonstrate what I mean. Quote: "In one sense, the conservative label for Nock and Mencken was and had been correct, as it is for all individualists. In the sense that the individualist believes in human differences and therefore in inequalities, these are, to be sure, natural inequalities, which in the Jeffersonian sense would arise out of a free society as natural aristocracies. And these contrast sharply with the artificial inequalities that statist policies of caste and special privilege impose on society. But the individualist must always be anti-egalitarian. Mencken had always been a frank and joyous elitist in this sense, and at least as strongly opposed to democratic egalitarian government as to all other forms of government. But Mencken emphasized that, as in the free market, an aristocracy must constantly justify its existence. In other words, there must be no artificial conversion of its present strength into perpetual rights." Unquote. So, what I'm getting there is that when we hear that someone talks about freedom, it's freedom for who should be the follow-up. Because if freedom is not having your means of survival gatekept behind another person's agency, then there are people in our society who, generally speaking, have that freedom. And they are given that freedom by ideological predilections, like what Rothbard kind of puts forward in this book. But not most people. Most people have their means of survival gatekept in some way, not by nature, but by another human's decisions. And really, when it comes down to it, it's about the idea that the market is the system that produces the best privileged superiors, the best people to have power over others and take away their freedom and only have freedom themselves. And so it's still fundamentally authoritarian, because You know, in a monarchy, the king is very free. You know, in Rome, the emperor was very free. He could do more than either of us could do, for sure. And we supposedly live in the free world now. So, I guess my point is that I don't think that freedom is a really good thing to judge an ideology by, because it's always more nuanced than that. It's always a matter of freedom for who, and freedom for who to do what.
Yeah, that explanation at the end, that like footnote at the end, freedom for who and freedom for who to do what, is very important. Because I feel like if you said you can't judge a political philosophy by its freedom, and we have a podcast that has done a couple readings on communist ideologies, people would have a field day.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's...
But I guess I technically agree with you, but it has to be like considered and a portion of it. But it can't be like the overarching reason why you stick to a political philosophy is your personal freedom. That's kind of fucked up. Yeah,
and I mean, yeah, the sleight of hand that goes into this kind of rhetoric is that they are replacing the average person, the general population, with the business owner more often than not. You know what I mean? Like, it's always about the freedom to start a business, the freedom to conduct business in the way that you want to. But it's never the freedom to have good benefits and not be bankrupted by the fact that you have a health emergency or something like that. I'm gonna be real with you, man. This book was a slog. I fucking hated this book. I mean, like, I could have gotten more specific about things that I want to talk about. Oh my god, what a waste of time that would have been. I hope that some of the things we talked about are useful to our listeners.
Is this the first work of theory we've talked about where we read the theory so they don't have to because no one wants to?
God, it was really bad.
No satirical Ayn Rand episodes?
No, I don't think we're gonna do any Ayn Rand.
Even for the meme?
I can't.
Should I plug our shit?
Yeah, you can plug our shit.
Yeah. You want me to plug your shit, Mark? Okay.
Do it, please.
If you want to tell us how much you also hate Rothbard, you can do so on Reddit at r/WeReadTheoryPod. Or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter, also at WeReadTheoryPod. And I will respond to you as promptly as humanly possible. Or you can just listen to this and all of our other episodes on our YouTube, We Read Theory. Once I get around to uploading all the other ones. A little behind. That's okay.
Maybe they'll be up by the time this releases, honestly.
More pluggables?
Do we have more pluggables?
We might.
You know...
Oh, our Parler account. I forgot.
We have some... Well, we do have some things in the works, but they're the exact time... some potential collaborations with other leftist creators, which we're very excited about, kind of reaching out and getting more involved in the community. But none of the plans are finalized yet. Nothing is like timing or dates is finalized yet. So just keep an eye on the Twitter and on the timeline, and I'll probably make a post on the sub as well, to let you guys all know what we're going to be on and when.
Yeah, so I think what you should take from this is that if you are streaming on Twitch and you need 2 extra dudes for Among Us, hit the DMs. Go for it. All right. Thank you all for listening. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Love you guys.